Okay, so again, welcome. So we're here to talk about using groups to enhance student learning, interaction, and community, and what student group means could mean different things to different people, and we will be getting that into that a little bit more specifically as we get into our session today. But do for us to attempt to model what you can do in terms of that student learning, interactivity, and community. So that's part of what we hope to do here today. And so there will be some group work that you will be doing. And again, just want to remind you, yep, feel free to use the group chat for questions, comments, anything. I also want to mention when I look up, I have a monitor. My camera's right there, but I'm looking up to my monitor, which is actually where I see all of you. And otherwise, I wouldn't be able to see what I'm doing at the same time. So I'm not ignoring you when I'm looking up. I'm actually looking at you and or the notes of what we have going on here today. And so to get us started, well, to keep us going, I guess, really, just a few of good housekeeping things. We will share a handout that has most of the content of what we'll be talking about today. So obviously you want to take notes, but the handout will be coming to you with other resources or things that we refer to. And we are strategically sharing that handout at some point in time throughout this presentation, so it's not coming right at the beginning, but you will get access to it. We've said use the chat again. That's part of creating community. That's part of what we're hoping to help do today. So let's get started with our first sort of informal question for the chat. And that is really just, who are you? Your name is going to appear when you start typing your name, so you don't necessarily have to say I'm so-and-so, but let us know, are you an instructor of what? Are you an instructional designer? Are you a curriculum coordinator? A combination of those things. Feel free to take a minute and put that into the chat. And then we're also kind of wondering what brought you here today. If you have specific questions that you want to make sure that you get out there at the front so we can try to address that as we're going through things, feel free to throw that in there as well. I'm just going to pause while you're doing that. Hi, Stacy. Hey, Mark. Thank you. Fine. All right, we have a wide range of subjects and it looks like range of also students that you may be working with across obviously multiple campuses, but also undergraduate to graduate, and different roles of where you are in terms of teaching, helping, directing, thinking about students. Some of you starting in 2 weeks, and some may have a little bit more time to think about some of this stuff too. So yeah, we at any point in time, if we start to assume that you know something, because I think in many ways, many of us at this point are assuming many people know things about Zoom, but many of you may, if you've been off for the semester or sabbatical or you weren't teaching, you may not have as much experience with Zoom as everybody else had to learn this last semester. So feel free to make us pause and slow things down. This is also where I would encourage you to turn on your camera. This is a safe space, well, as safe as we can, space for you to turn off your camera or turn on your camera and practice how that feels and how that works for you in terms of being present for things. If that is something that you know that may be a little nerve-wracking for you, now's the time to practice that out here. There's not a whole lot of us, and it also can add to the presence of what we're doing here today too. So all right, and then the other thing that we're gonna both potentially model and practice with is we have a poll here. So part of what we're going to get into today is we're going to talk a little bit about the pedagogy of group work, and we're also going to talk about the technology of group work. And so we can do that where we spend more time on one or the other, or a mostly equal split. And so I'm going to launch a poll right now, and you should see something that has popped up asking you the question of, would you rather spend more time engaging with the pedagogy or the technology of group work, or mostly an equal split? So go ahead and answer that now, and I can see some answers coming in. And I believe, okay, I think that everybody did that. 15, and I'm going to share the results here. So what we can see, I believe, can you all see the results now? Am I doing it double? You can see my screen and that. So mostly equal split, with a few people saying they want more time on technology, a few people saying they want pedagogy. So what we have planned for is a pretty equal split with it. If I will say, because you know how sometimes these things run out of time, and as we've already had the disclaimer earlier, we may not have put this together. This is our first time Claire and I are doing this presentation together. So if we run out of time at the end and haven't gotten to all the technology pieces yet, there are more opportunities for that. We are having drop-ins every day from 10 to 2. And we can share more about those resources of where you can go. And that is where you can come and practice some of the technology, or ask about that if we don't, if we know.
And just,
what
yeah, and adding real quick on the pedagogy side too, same. So both ATSS and CEI can answer some of those questions. So if you have questions related to the pedagogy that we don't get to, feel free to reach out with those too.
So our agenda today: what is group work and why do we use it? We're going to practice a little bit of that. What are some effective group work practices? We're going to talk a little bit about group work in Canvas specifically, and group work with Zoom, and then a few other tools for group work of how we know people have been using them. Mostly we'll talk about university supported tools. There's one tool that we know students are using that is not university supported, but I want to mention it because students are using it so much. So that is our agenda. And I want to, I went back and forth real quick there. If you have other things that come up and you have a specific question that you're thinking about, I want you to encourage you to feel free to put that in the chat or bring that up as we're talking about things if it relates to that. So.
Yes, please feel free to interrupt us. We are interruptible. You can ask questions, you can talk. Please feel free to do that. So as we're transitioning, so part of what we're thinking about is that we wanted to kind of demo one potential model that you could think about, or one way to think about doing group work kind of in the moment within a Zoom session. And so we're going to put you in a few breakout rooms. Let's see, how many people do we have here? So maybe I think I'm going to do 3 breakout rooms. And let's see, I see some questions over in the chat too, so we can come back to those. So just to give you a framework for what we're asking you to think through. So I'll put you in some breakout rooms in a minute. And we have 3 questions for you to be thinking about. And we have a Google Doc that's linked in this slide. Let me also put the link in the chat over here. So if you would take a second and navigate over to that Google Doc, this is where we want your groups to be kind of taking notes about these questions. And after a bit of time, we'll bring you back. So let's head on over to that Google Doc just for a second. And then when you get there, you'll see that there are different breakout groups listed. When you get put in a breakout group, go to the table that's associated with your group number. And we want you to think about basically 3 questions. So the first question is, what is group work? What does that mean to you in your contexts? Why do you want to use it? Why is it important to you? And then share any examples of successful group work, either that you've seen yourself or that you've used in your teaching. So take note of some of those as you're talking. We'll probably give you about 5 minutes to do that. So before we put you in breakout rooms, any questions? I always like to, a primer on Google Docs. So we could give you a little more detail. Do y'all have enough information now to work on this activity? Any questions about this activity to begin with? Great, okay. So let me go ahead and put folks into, let's see, I might do, we have 16 folks. So in order to keep you in groups of roughly 3, I think I might put you in 4 breakout rooms. So let's see. All right, so sit tight and accept the breakout room invite when it comes.
Are you heading to a breakout room?
Nope, I'm going to stay here to kind of keep track of time. Okay, it looks like everybody's gone. Okay, good. Cool. So let's see where we're at. Okay. So I'm going to broadcast a message to folks with a link to the Google Doc again real quick. Sound good?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay.
Do you want, I'm being prompted to go into breakout 2.
So just ignore it. I mean, unless you want to go into the breakout room, totally up to you. So in about maybe 2-ish minutes, I'll give folks maybe like a 2-minute warning.
How about, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to stop sharing so you can, are you okay? You want to take over sharing the whatever, because you're doing the next few slides.
Sure, I can do that. Okay, let me share.
No one's typing yet.
I know. It always takes folks a
Oh, there we
minute
go.
to kind of get, oh good, we've got some folks. Takes folks a minute to kind of get going, and that's why I know that this will not be enough time for folks, and I think that's okay, but I also think it's important for them to experience that, to know that this can take a good chunk of time to do. So let me, whoops. So I'm going to send folks a message. I know it's real quick, but just a heads up, couple of minutes left. Sound okay?
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. We have, how many groups do we have?
4.
Will you humor me and tell me who's supposed to be in breakout group 2?
Right now? Yeah. Anna, Brian, and Katie.
Okay.
Sorry, Anna. I can't pronounce her last name. Anna R.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay.
And we're pretty sure that the recording right now is probably recording our talking back and forth,
Yes.
not them in the breakouts. Yep.
That's right. Yep, that's been our experience too. Okay, so I'm going to hit the close rooms, which will give them a minute. Sound good?
Yeah.
Okay. And actually, I'm going to stop sharing just for a second. I'll share again. Oops, there we go. Okay, I was curious to see what folks are putting.
It turns out that I couldn't log on to the Google Docs. I've never used them before. There's probably a problem with never having registered or used them before.
So you weren't able to get there?
It didn't say how to get. It said I didn't have the administrative approval, but yet it didn't say how to get that. So that's kind of an initial problem with just the technology.
It could be if you're logged the whatever website that you or browser you pulled up, that could be part of the problem because it wants to authorize you as a University of Minnesota person is probably what it was attempting to do there.
So how do I go about fixing that?
Call the helpline. They can help you out with that. Probably what you just need to do is log into your email and then you'll be able to do that. Once you've logged into your email, the UMN email, there can be conflict with that, but you should be able to get past that.
Okay, so which helpline is that I'm logging into to get help?
I will put it in the chat.
Okay. I mean, is it like IT help or?
Yeah. There's a bunch of different ways.
So welcome back, everyone. Do you all feel like you had enough time to answer all those questions?
Not even started.
No, right. So part of the reason why we're demoing this, and we'll talk about the actual questions in a second, but part of the reason to demo this is to give you a sense if you're doing this kind of activity in a synchronous session, you want to do a couple of things that we didn't do in the interest of time, which is give folks a more thorough orientation to Google Docs, make sure folks know what technology they're using, and give folks adequate time to grapple with the questions you're asking them to. So you probably experienced that it was a little bit jarring. It took a second to get oriented and talk with each other, right? So, keep that in mind if you're doing quick short-term groups like this in your classes. So in a way, it was a little bit rough by design. That said, it looked like from your notes, folks were starting to have some good conversation. And so just to start with one of the questions, one thing that we wanted to kind of get at here is when we're talking about groups, do we mean groups that are meeting once in one Zoom session? Are we talking about longer term groups, focused on a product or a project over the course of the semester? We might do different things with different kinds of groups. Are groups being set up in synchronous space, like in Zoom sessions like this, or asynchronous? Are these groups that are going to be communicating on their own? What kinds of products or takeaways are you asking groups to manage? And even in this short little one-time group that we put you in, you'll notice that we gave you something to work on to bring back. And then were there other dimensions of groups that you all talked about that you wanted to bring forward? Just one or two folks maybe.
Amazing how much we act like our students when we're in a group like this.
It's all right. Honestly, I like to say, so I say this in a lot of workshops that I give, that I usually say at the beginning of the semester with students, I'm 100% comfortable with awkward silences. I don't mind them at all. And I'm happy to, if I really want folks to jump into a discussion, I am happy to wait it out. But that said, so as I've been rambling, any other key dimensions of groups that you all wanted to bring forward from your groups?
Carol, were you going to say something?
Well, we started off introducing ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So that's.
Yeah, so knowing who your group members are and setting up opportunities to do that is a piece of the puzzle. Yes. And not just assuming that students will do that, without any kind of prompting. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think our group talked a little bit about just like this key idea of wanting to establish some kind of space for community. Like knowing that our learners have been going through such transition. We talked about like one person in our group's class focuses on first year learners and they're coming out of that senior year and they might have like a really bad taste in their mouth about their online experience or what learning looks like in these platforms. And then my class is specifically sophomores and knowing that those learners had just like a really rough, I do think our juniors and our seniors, they in a lot of ways have community established in other aspects of their experience at the university. And so I do think that those first year students and those sophomores, we have to be able to use groups in order for them to feel like they're connected to the learning process. So I think it just takes a different connotation now, given our time and place and space in which we're trying to engage them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just to add to that, that's especially true in online courses. So thinking about teaching online, it requires more effort and time to think through how you set up community than if you're in a face-to-face class and folks you have more opportunities to naturally get folks to interact with and talk with each other. Yeah, great.
It definitely takes intentionality around that. Part of that is allowing people time to introduce themselves, and then also get into what they need to be talking about.
Mm-hmm.
It might help to give them some indication of how they could begin talking so that it's not an awkward waste of time by telling them to go in like alphabetical order or assigning somebody to start the group or something of that sort.
Yeah, so giving some structure to what that can look like, what that should look like. Ideas about what kinds of things folks might talk about. So it doesn't feel like busy work and it doesn't feel extraneous. So ways to connect it to your course too. I know in my teaching, when I ask folks to do introductions, my disciplinary background sociology, and I ask folks to reflect on their own social context in different ways as part of that introduction. So ways you can connect that meaningfully to your course is helpful too.
I'm also going to chime in and bring in the little technology side of things here that I don't know, for those of you new to Zoom, I think you noticed that when we set this up that you got to, you didn't get to choose which group you're in, but you had to press a button to go into your group. There is a way to set it up that you would automatically go into your group once the instructor teaches that. The disclaimer with that is that only the host can set up breakout rooms. So if you have a TA or if you have a student that is helping you monitor your chat, only the instructor is going to be able to set up those groups. And so if it's something that you want the same groups each time, that there's going to be some technology practice around that. And then hopefully you also noticed that you got the little messages, and those were things that Claire was intentionally sending out and saying, okay, you have 2 minutes. Okay, you have that. So just some things on the technology side of ways that you can you could even be sending new prompts to students during that time. But those come and go and disappear. So we still would suggest having someplace where they can go to and be like, oh yeah, what are we talking about in this group?
Yeah, thank you.
And
you can also set up, oh, sorry, go ahead, Katie, go ahead.
Can you also set it up to avoid that 1 minute lag coming back to the main group?
You can't, yes, you can set it up that you can have a warning. One, you can have a clock. I don't think we did the clock on this one that can count down and they can see it in the corner that how much time they have. And then you can give them a minute warning, or you can just press a button and say, everybody come back. So you had some choices of coming back. And at the minute, when the minute ran out, you would be forced back. You can kind of control how that happens. Yes, I think that's what you're asking.
Question. It's kind of a technology, but also a Zoom-like question. So as I look at the groups, and many of the groups have been group settings, or as I see everyone listed here, you all have your first and last name. But I know when a lot of our freshmen come in, they necessarily don't have a first and last name attached to their email. It's some arbitrary modification of their name with some digits after it. So in light of keeping with the community sense, how are the names connected in Zoom to their student account so that I could be respectful and actually address them by name?
Good question.
I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, one, you can go and change, for those of you that were here early, my account that I'm actually in is an ATSS account, and I can go and change that. So when you find your participant, if you move your little mouse over it and you find participants, and click on that, you should see you there. And if you hover over that, there is a more button for most people, and you can rename your name and name, add your names. And so people can put out there what name they want to be called.
Does that stay permanently as a rename, or is it just temporary?
I think there's a button that you can choose to say keep that way. But I will also say it'll probably depend on whether you're part of the medical school or not. I know that there's some different things that can come through differently from HIPAA compliant stuff that has to happen for students and instructors there.
Can I ask a question since you brought it up about, because I'm coming from an AHC department. One of the things I'm interested in is being able to take attendance. And you can't do that automatically. You can do registration, which is what we had for this. We had to click on a registration. I'm not sure because I haven't had groups yet through my AHC account, what sort of things are going to be available. For example, with a poll, I might want a poll to be a class participation thing, so I need to know the name of the student answering the questions. Do you know if I have registration, can my polls not be anonymous, or do they have to be anonymous? Or do I just have to figure all this out?
I don't know the details of the AHC piece. I don't know.
Right. I mean, this is one thing I'm also, I mean, this is something because like I'm not teaching medical school. I'm teaching an undergraduate class in the College of Biological Sciences. So I've been trying to figure out who it is I need to appeal to for instructors like me. If we can't do it with our AHC, my X500, we need a change in the technology so that we can get an alternative, like instructors. This is my instructor's X500 or something. And I don't know if that's something, I think coming with some additional input from your office as to why that is important for us as instructors would be helpful.
Yep, I do know Peg Shervin, who is a part of academic technology in the medical school, has been a part of these conversations and trying to make things sort of more user-friendly, basically for students and instructors in AHC.
The problem with that is that they're just doing it for medical school students, and so they will have certain HIPAA things.
I mean, I don't want to spend a lot of time just specifically on AHC students in this. I'm with you. Yep, there's things out there, and I can try to connect you also with
thanks.
who I know is a part of doing that, because I'm not as familiar with the details of all of that.
Okay, appreciate it.
But yep, it's a concern.
Good questions, everyone. I'm seeing over in the chat too, there are some specific questions about breakout rooms and other specific things that you can tweak in your account. So just from my perspective, a lot of what folks are asking about are possible, and getting folks connected to the right resources is some of what's going on too in the chat. So on the pedagogy side, I think I want to shift a little bit away from this set of questions. I think in the interest of time, because there are a lot of questions about technology, and we'll be talking more about that in a minute, I want to skip over. I'm assuming you all are here because you want to do group work in some way and see the benefits of that. So I think I'm going to skip that question for now. But let me come back here. I do want to take a second, and I think I'll start just by sharing a few effective practices for group work, and then maybe just take one or two other suggestions from folks, and suggest that if you want, you can continue to add suggestions in that Google Doc that you all were working in. So a few things, first of all, some of which we've touched on already. If you're doing group work in your classes, think about being transparent with your students about why you're asking them to do group work to begin with. I don't know about you, but I've heard from my students from their experiences in other classes that they hate group work. I hear from students that they hate group work all the time. So I think part of the issue there is being clear with your students why you're asking them to do that work and how it's going to benefit them in the longer term. If they see it as busy work, if they don't see it as beneficial, or if it doesn't connect meaningfully to their lives in some way, I think students are more likely to feel they don't like group work. So being clear with students about why you're asking them to do the work they're doing. Making sure that you're connecting group work to your aims, your objectives for your course, and your aims and objectives for the specific class session that you're using. So again, to help students feel like it's not busy work, setting up community in ways that are meaningful. So we've talked about that a little bit already. In general, with group work, you always want to scaffold that work. So if it's spread out across the semester, if students are producing a product, to start with some small, lower stakes chunks to kind of get students acclimated to working with their particular group. And breaking up large assignments into smaller pieces is good teaching practice anyway. So doing that with groups so there isn't just this huge high stakes thing right at the end of the semester is in general a good teaching practice. Sometimes one of the challenges is with group work is, who's doing what in the group and helping students to kind of keep track of that. So you can either assign or ask students to internally decide on particular group roles. So whether it's one person who's responsible for reporting back to the class about what's going on, or, you have different folks who are in charge of taking notes or putting together materials. So consider setting up group roles for the groups that you're crafting, especially again for longer term projects, but even for short term projects. So if we were doing this kind of modeled activity in a class, I might say, okay, these are the folks who are in charge of reporting back or taking notes. So you can do that kind of thing in a single class session with a short term group too. So let me pause for a second and just ask any practices that you all identified in your groups. Maybe we could take a couple that you want to bring forward that you found to be useful or that you saw to be useful.
Can you give an example of scaffolding for success that you have listed there?
Yeah, absolutely. So for example, in a course that I've taught in the past, I had students put together the script for a podcast. I didn't actually have them record the podcast, but I had them write a script. So from the beginning of the semester, I had this planned out in smaller pieces. So in the first part of the assignment, I had them introduce themselves to each other and make some decisions about what kind of podcast they wanted to work on. I gave them some materials to read through and look at to understand what a podcast is, because I found that most of my students don't know what a podcast is. And that's just their context. So giving them some of those materials, and then have them sort of figure out their roles, maybe do that a little bit later, to have them do some drafting, some different iterations of drafts as the semester proceeded. So to kind of break a large assignment down into smaller pieces, that also gave me the opportunity to give them some feedback along the way, give them some grades along the way so they could see where they were in the course. And also help me kind of troubleshoot if there were groups that were struggling to connect for various reasons, or if students were disappearing and group members were telling me, this can happen especially in online classes, if I would hear from students, I haven't heard from my group member, this is kind of an issue, that gave me the impetus to reach out to them too, which is part of building that connection and community. So does that answer your question, Alice?
Yeah, I just, I like examples because then you kind of solidify how it might relate to my course too. Did you have the same groups together for something like that? And you just increasingly amped up the requirements so that it kind of propelled them forward?
Yes, yep, absolutely. It was really important, and this would be important in an online class in particular, to set that clearly up from the beginning. So there aren't any surprises along the way. So there's quite a bit of work on the front end to get that structure set up. There always need to be kind of tweaks along the way, especially if you're doing something new. But yeah, it was the same group working on the same podcast all semester long. And yeah. So other examples for folks, anything you wanted to share? Things that have worked for you?
I'll jump in.
I teach language classes, and
Go ahead.
obviously speaking is a big thing in language classes. I know there are a couple of other language teachers here in the group too. And I was teaching an advanced Spanish class this semester. And so I assigned ongoing groups for that conversation class. That sometimes they were doing a particular project, like they had a presentation to do on the environment and putting together a proposal on solving an environmental problem. Other times they just had a list of discussion questions that were supposed to meet and talk about. But one of the things that I did was I set up ongoing Zoom rooms for each of those groups so that they could meet asynchronously, but in terms of the class, but they could meet together at any time they wanted to. And I actually set those up, and I told them I was doing this. I set them up so that they automatically recorded so that I could go back in and see what they had done, check and see how much they were speaking Spanish, whether they were on task. Obviously, I didn't watch every minute of it, but And that actually worked pretty well.
Awesome. So setting up the structure, like a really clear structure for students and making it easy for them to get into groups. Awesome. Thanks. So Steve, one more and then we'll move on. Go ahead, Steve.
Oh, thanks. No, I was just going to add on top of the similar scaffolding that you talked about. I do principles of marketing, where we have a marketing plan that groups are working on throughout the semester. So we'll take each topic and then I'll break them out into breakout groups. They'll work on it, and then I have them report back to the class at the end, and that's been really helpful for, you know, two things. When we go into breakout rooms, normally in the classroom, I'd be going around to the tables and working with the teams as they're working on each topic during the week. And I don't think you had mentioned yet the advantage of the breakout rooms, that you can, as an instructor, jump around to the different breakout groups, and that's worked out really well. So I can kind of check in, answer any questions, make sure that everybody is staying engaged in the conversation. And then also that the breakout groups can flag and indicate that they'd like the instructor to jump to their group. So that's actually worked out really well, because then I'll usually, in between me initiating and them asking for, I'm jumping the entire time, and then having them report back at the end really kind of gives them that requirement. And to be honest with you, it's, especially in a larger class, like 60, it's probably easier to identify and give extra credit for those people that are presenting to the entire class. So I got a lot of positive feedback from the students that we were able to keep that same connection with their teams after we went online. That's going to be my challenge in the fall if we are starting online, because in the spring, actually, we were face-to-face, so they were able to start making those connections, and then we just continued it. So that's, in my mind, is how do I get that same connection if we're online from the beginning?
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Worked well.
Yeah, those are some great details. I think, yeah, there's definitely a difference between the shift to remote teaching from this semester and teaching fully online. I know that CEI has an upcoming workshop on community and motivation that's on Monday, if folks are interested in learning a little bit more about that. And there are other workshops that are forthcoming that are related to that topic. So thank you everyone for sharing. So in the interest of time, I think, Sarah, probably makes sense to shift over to thinking a little bit more about technology. Always happy to continue the pedagogy conversation if folks have questions about that or share more examples. So I think I'll stop screen sharing now, and Sarah will shift over to you.
Sounds good. I think I'm going to take over. We're going to get a little jolting around. Sorry, I'm going to share my screen really quick here too. This is set up here, but oops, there, you're seeing my cat. That is not what I meant to have happen. What I wanted to point out is that this is this link is to the handout that we actually have. And so we're going to kind of skip. I'm going to really quickly go over this to get into the technology pieces. And so, Claire, are you able to put this link in the chat for us? Great. So people don't necessarily have to get this right away. Because basically when we're designing, and this is what we've been actually naturally talking about, is that, you know, make sure that things connect with your aims. You're trying to create authentic hard projects and scaffold them. You're thinking about constructing the teams carefully, and there's some resources in the handout that we're giving you that you can look into that a little bit more about how to set those up. And part of what you're doing with this is teaching teamwork skills. So, you know, introducing yourselves. Part of teamwork is dealing with conflict. And so coaching people to how they can deal with conflict, especially if they're producing something together. It's just discussions, there can be conflict there, but, you know, if they're producing something together, there can definitely be conflict in terms of who's doing what. And then making sure that you're assessing the student teams individually and as a group as how they have functioned. And so some of the examples that we have out there and that are linked in this handout, I teach in the leadership minor and I teach a leadership class. And so we have something called the Provocative Statement Project. And this is what I'm going to show you sort of how it's mini set up in this practice Canvas site that I have. And so what is here is actually a link to the Provocative Statement Project, and it goes, this document is a very long document that kind of goes on and on of all the different pieces of it. But the first thing that we start with is having students start with the group norms paper. And that's the first thing that they have to produce as a group that sets up their group norms. If they have roles, what are their roles, how often they're planning on getting together, how they're going to communicate, what their expectations are around communicating, and how quickly they're going to get back. to each other and all those things too. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time diving into this example simply because we need to get to the technology. And then these are some other examples. There's more examples that are in the on the handout as well. There's a matrix of examples that you can get to, this matrix of examples that is out there. So for Canvas tools, what I want to show you, my kitty again, is there's a course that I have set up that's just sort of a fake group course that a lot of instructors that have gone through when I've done this group session before, I've made this so you can access this as a student and I could put you all in as groups. But what I'm showing you here is the different ways that you can set things up inside Canvas for group work. So one of the things is when you have like the group norms paper that says submit it group as a group. And then one of the things that we do in this research project is the first thing that they're turning in when they're doing some research is an annotated bibliography draft source. And they're just turning in one. It's really for us to test, do they know what a peer-reviewed source is? And so that they have to submit individually, and you'll see it says submit individually. And then as a group, they're turning in annotated bibliography peer review, and so that gets in there too. And so some of the things you can see that will help make things clear is putting it in the title. And I'm going to go into one of these specifically. This is an assignment, and you'll notice that it actually links out to that big group norms or the group document. But we're saying here you're just submitting one group. We're letting them know that they're just submitting one copy per group. And how you set that up inside of an assignment, and you can choose whether you link out to a Google Doc or not. You could have instructions in here. But what is important is I scroll down here for all of these things is that setting this up as a group assignment. And so as a group assignment, when you check this, it's saying, okay, are you going to assign grades to each student individually, or are you going to do it as a group? I usually do it as a group, and every once in a while you have a group complaining about somebody, and you can come in and change this if you need to change their group. And so what you have is the different types of groups. You will need to set up groups in your course to be able to allow them to turn in an assignment as a group. If this is what they're doing, if they're doing some group project together. Naturally, somebody's mowing their lawn nearby me, so let me know if you can't hear me or if the background gets too difficult there. Or you can set up a new group category is the other way you can do it. So you can write from here, you can say, I want a new group category. And you can say, okay, this is for, whatever group project that we're creating. This is, we call this PSB, but that's already out there. Let's just not being, lawn mowing groups. There's my creativity for the day. You could do it where they are allowed to self-sign up into things. If you have different topics of groups, you can set that up. But in this case, I'm not going to do that. You can manually set students up, but I'm just going to randomly put people into groups. And so split students into however many groups you want. You could have them be in the same section or not. You could still say, I'm going to manually create them. And a student leader, as of right now, I need to test because it's been a while. They can't really do anything as a group leader. I think it shows that they're a group leader, and I think they can change the name of their group, and that's about all they do as a group leader. So it's not anything fancy. And so once I press save, it's putting them into lawn mowing groups, and I can now see here, this is one of the new groups that's just created. And so I have my, due date and who it's assigned to. You can assign some assignments to different groups if you wanted to, but right now everybody in the class is getting this assignment, but they're turning it in within their group. So I'm going to pause a moment and see if there's any questions with this right now.
Sarah, one question over in the chat for you, just an FYI.
Sure, and I've lost my chat.
So Katie was just asking, did you say you'll share this sample class?
Yes, this, in fact, in the handout under Canvas, there's resources on group work in Canvas, but one of the things that I've put there is the link to how you can self-enroll into this course. So you would be put in as a student, but if you want access as an instructor, let me know and I could add you as a non-editing instructor and you could go poke around a little bit to see what else is out there. Thank you. Any other questions?
Brian wonders what GroupMe is.
Oh, GroupMe, yep, that's the technology that students like to use. Most of the time when we do the group norms project, they establish in themselves that they're going to communicate through GroupMe rather than text, rather than email. GroupMe is a non-university supported tool out there, but it is a tool that is pretty fantastic in that you don't have to share your actual phone number or text number, you know, so you can still have some privacy there, but you can share documents, you can share videos, you can communicate with each other and get notifications. And so that's, I know a lot of students are using GroupMe. In fact, I think every group I had this last semester used GroupMe for their group project and how they communicated with one another. Other questions?
I've had students, I've never heard of GroupMe. They've used Snapchat and things like that. If they want one that doesn't allow sharing of stuff, can we, since it's not approved by the university, can we even mention it, or?
We mention them because we leave it up to them on how they're going to communicate. So this gets, and where I was just going now is going to show you, if you want a little bit more control and you see how the students are engaging with one another, then you're going to want them to work in the group, what we call group space within Canvas. So Canvas, once you set up groups, creates a group space for students. And it's basically, they have their own mini Canvas site that they can communicate with each other that way too. And so what you can see out here is I've created a lot of different groups with this. I don't think I actually did this, actually put people, oh, it did put people in groups. Here we are. And so with this lawn mowing group, I can see I've got a bunch of fake students in here as well, but there's also instructors that have gone in. I can see these lawn mowing groups and I can go in and change their names once they've given me a group name. Usually one of the things we do is tell them to come up with a group name, and then they can, you know, they can find their group name. And so how you can visit their group homepage is, I did this quickly, sorry. I was in Canvas and I went to people. So when you go into people and you see everyone here, there is this groups. And so you can go into groups of this tab and then it pulls up all the different groups that I've created. So we just created this lawn mowing group. I'm gonna go into lawn mowing group 1. Should have done this a different way, I'm just realizing, but I'm gonna go in and show you this space. So this space right now, if I go to people, where it's telling me right here up here, group work DC, lawn mowing group 1. So group work DC is my Canvas course. So it would have your, whatever the name of your course is there, and then whatever group you're part of. And you as an instructor can switch between all these different groups. They don't have this access, but you do. Their homepage, you can't really control homepage. So we have lots of complaints to Canvas about that. But this announcements feature right here is what students can send out their own announcements to each other, and it's only going to go to the group members. So one of the things that you can coach with them, if this is how you want them communicating, you have them use the announcements feature in here. So if you want them communicating so you see how they're communicating or who is communicating or not communicating, this will send out an email to them, assuming they have their notifications set on for that, or they haven't turned them off, because its default is to have that turned on. And then within here, they can create their own discussion, or if you've done a group discussion, if you've created a discussion out there and assigned groups to it, it would show up here. That's what I was realizing I should have done, so you could see that. But they can also share files. So right here, here's a files. They could go in and share files with one another. Collaboration creates Google Docs for them that they can do. And they can also go, this people page, they have access to this so that they can go and see their groups members. They don't see the emails here. So I'm seeing this as an instructor. They wouldn't see that. And what they can see here is the teachers and TAs that are part of the class, so that they know that those people have access to that. My caveat or disclaimer about this group space that I think is pretty awesome in Canvas is that students don't always know that they're in the group space. So it requires a little bit of coaching and a little bit of expectations around what you want them to do in here. So I'm going to pause and see if there's any questions with all that I just sort of flew through.
One quick question from the chat I see from Alice. Alice wants to know, what is PSP? I think there was like PSP groups on a previous screen.
That's the group, that's the model that I had for you. We called it Provocative Statement Project, and it's the project, the group project that they have to do in the class that I teach. And so that's why we called it PSP, Provocative Statement Project.
So it doesn't have anything to do with the actual technology, but the
No,
subject.
not at all. Just happens to be what I have set up there.
Another question I had was, how do you have the multiple instructors listed there when there's only one profile for each course?
I'm not sure what you mean by profile, but in people is where you can go,
Under
can add instructors.
Okay.
Oh, this is just my account. So I'm logged in as me, but we can go in here and I can see who are all of my teachers. And these are people that have been put in as teacher, and we can see their role right here as teacher. So if you're in here as a teacher or even a non-editing teacher, you should be able to see other people here. If you're a non-editing instructor, you won't be able to add other people, but the main.
So it would be under my account, under courses, and then people, and I can list whoever I want to be a part of it.
Correct. Yep. And this gets into some of the Canvas basic stuff in terms of what courses you'll see and access to all of that too. But your dashboard is where you'll be able to see the courses that you're already assigned to through PeopleSoft in terms of instructing. So the courses that your students would be a part of will be on your dashboard. I'm not going to click on it because I have a whole bunch there and it takes a while to go there. Other questions?
So one over here from Karen, who says, if we have students using Canvas group pages, are there resources to direct them to in order to learn how to use all the features? That's a great question.
Part of what's on the handout that we have handed to you, I'll show you, bring it over here, because I think you can see this now. Down here, this instructor guide, this is more for you, but right here, creating groups, oh, that is still for you. Student resource right here, creating discussion and collaborations with groups. This is a 4-minute. The group space in particular, where I said students can get confused about things, it starts about 217 in there. And so there's also group space in Canvas, understanding group space guide and preparing students for group space. So there's a few resources out here on this document. And here is the site that I was just in. So if you want to self-enroll, you can self-enroll in there. And again, you can email me if you have, if you'd like to be able to see this as an instructor. But my caveat to you, I will just warn you of this, that this has annoyed some people, this lawn mowing groups that I just set up. There are people, if they've self-enrolled, just got put into this, and sometimes you get notifications that you just got added to a group, and that has become annoying for some people. Like poor Eileen just got a notification that she was added to a group and is going to be like, what group? What's going on? So if you don't like that, you can let me know and I can take you out of the course. So that's happened before too.
So how will this handout be made available? Are you going to email the link or what?
It is in the chat for the Zoom chat, and then also the sorry, I'm flipping around here a lot. You can also use this Z link, get you to that handout. So z.umn.edu. This is the design challenge, or that /design challenge group work will get you to that handout.
Yep, and I also put, it's over here in the chat, so you can click on the link in the chat too, and that'll take you right there.
Okay. One
Other questions?
Gone now.
I'm sorry, my chat had disappeared, so I was missing all of these coming in.
I think we got most of them. I will say, as folks are thinking about questions in the last couple of minutes, there are a couple of opportunities as you have questions. So for example, there are drop-in consultation slots between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. Monday through Friday. Let me pop the link. Yeah, I'm on the chat, don't worry. Let me pop the link into the chat. If you look, you can see. So they're both workshops that are offered by ATSS and the link to get help during those drop-in consultations here.
Yes, Katie, PowerPoint animations do work as normal on PowerPoint. I think, at least we tried to do that in here, so you could tell me if it was working. Yeah. Oops, going backwards now. Here, are you seeing the animations come in, Katie? Okay, then yes, they do. All right, we are at time, so feel free to leave if you feel the need to leave. I think we could probably stick around for a few more minutes if people have questions or other things that you would like to know more about.
Will we
Thanks,
have access to that chat after the session's done?
Oh, thank you for sharing that. Chat, if you have in your chat, I meant to say this, there's a 3-dot button near the bottom where you would type in your chat. If you press that 3-dot button, you can save the chat and it will save all of this, the resources and all of that stuff for you. So go ahead and feel free to do that right now where you save chat.
Hey, Sarah, it also saves the private chats, right? When you save a chat, like it's
your private chat, it won't
right.
save my private chat.
Right. I was just throwing it out there in case you have private chats going and you're, yeah, so it saves it.
Does it save the chats up until the point where you say save it, or from then on as well? Like, could you press that during the presentation?
I've had mixed results with that. I, at one point in time, swore it saved it once you pressed it. It saved it for the rest of the time. But I think now things have changed that once you press it in the middle, it just saves what you've at that point in time. So you typically want to do it at the end of the session.
And I think, Sarah, correct me if I'm wrong about this, but if you're the host, when you save the chat, it also saves all of the private chats that have occurred within that. No?
No, it doesn't. Nope.
Okay.
We just tested that last week or 2 weeks ago, maybe,
Okay.
that I have tested. It doesn't, you don't see the private chats that are going on privately.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay.
And then Laura, in terms of the presentation, really, I mean, we can send you the presentation, but it's not accessible. Really, most of the stuff that we have referred to is in the handout, and we've made the handout accessible, and that's where most of that stuff is. If you really want to see it just because you feel like it's presented in a different way than the handout is and easier for you to access, let us know, and we can send that to you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Other questions?
I've got a question about this group space.
Mm-hmm.
I've been using groups in Canvas for the last, basically since we've had Canvas. And my student groups aren't showing up on the groups tab.
So that is one of the things, if you want to copy over from semester to semester, groups do not copy over. They sort of copy over. You won't, obviously, because you don't have the same students from semester to semester, so students don't copy over. What set up for groups, you know, it's tricky on how this happens, that it can cut. I think the groups do copy over. The fact that you want a group called lawnmowers would copy over, but if you then have to create it in your new one, and you still have to relink it, I think, to some of your assignments, is what we're calling.
Okay.
Is that, like, that answers your question, or is that's not quite what you were asking?
Well, I guess it's not quite what I'm asking. I mean, like, my groups function perfectly.
Great.
But I'm not seeing the group space at all.
Oh, do you put them mostly just in discussions, or do you have?
I have assignments
okay.
that are turning in as groups.
Thank you for pointing that out. One of the things I meant to say, or should have said, is that you cannot turn in an assignment from the group space. The group space, you can work on an assignment. Once you've completed something, there's no place in the group space to turn in an assignment unless you're having them turn in an assignment to a discussion.
So how do you get them to turn in just one assignment and not have it be confusing for them that which person is going to turn it in?
That group norms is one of the things that they should probably work out in that group norms, is who's going to turn in that assignment. I will say, if someone's turned in an assignment and a second person comes to turn it in, they will get a warning that says, hey, there's already been a submission. Are you sure you want to turn this submission in on top of that? I have had some students, like one of the projects that they have to do, they have to make a grid of stakeholders and then also do a bit of an analysis of that. And so I've had students, 2 different students in the group have done those things. And so they want to hand in both of those, and you can access both of those in SpeedGrader. But to me, I want them to put that all together. That's part of the group space. So then, you know, that's part of them being a group, is figuring out how to turn one thing in. And so we've had those conversations. Brian, I still don't know if I've answered your question though. So they, if they have, group space is best for working on if they're producing a product together and they are you know, trying to share sources and files and things like that that you also want to see. If you set up discussions for group space, they actually get put in a group space and they don't know they're in the group space when they're answering the discussions.
I'm saying I can't see a group space for my courses at all.
Here, let me share again. And where did I find my course back? Here it is. So where you will find it is under people.
Yeah.
And then if you've got groups set up, you're going to be able to see your groups created.
Sure.
And then once you go to specific groups, then this 3 dot over on the side here is where you can go and it says visit group home space.
Okay, great.
Yep. And then you're in their space. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Other questions?
Question here. I can't remember if I asked this or if anyone answered this. So you know how you did a poll in the beginning to know what we were interested in, if it was more the technology or if it was more of the pedagogy or both. Mm-hmm. Is there any way to link those results or those responses up to the gradebook in Canvas? Does that make sense? So like yes, as they're responding, I'd have their names and then their names I could export and I could import and then it automatically would, because I was thinking we didn't require the students to purchase clickers because we're not really sure what's happening, but I really like using clickers because it helps the students know what they know and don't know. And I'd like not to record it and to sit there and tell, you know what I mean? Like I'd like it to be more automated.
No. There's not a way to get the poll to Canvas. That's the quick, easy answer for you, but I'm trying to also come up with a solution for what you're asking. And so open if anybody else has ideas on how they're doing things.
I know I'm thinking about this. If you can export it to a spreadsheet in some way, you can sort by name, maybe. I'm wondering if the polling in Zoom doesn't do that easily, if there are other polling tools that might do that more easily. I know I've used other tools with like PowerPoint, but not so much in this kind of mode.
So could kind of go off of that with another question, would we be able to like save the chat? You know how we can get that out in a text file? Can you save the poll like a chat text? I don't know.
I don't know how the saving of polls goes. If what you're really wanting is sort of an attendance tracker, if that's part of what that is, where I just went really quick in Zoom. So zoom.umn.edu, I don't know what I went to, but it shows up as umnzoom.us. Under reports, you can go in and from your meetings or your webinars or whatever, you can see registrations for things. So, you know, Claire and I checked in last minute and I can generate a poll here to see things. So there's report queues. There's different ways. I don't do this that often, but there are ways that you can go in here. And this is actually the reports that we run to see how many people showed up to our Zoom meetings to say this is, you know, how many people showed up as we're tracking, you know, what we're doing and stuff. So there is a way to go and see who has come in. This gets back to that students logging in and how they've logged in. And if they haven't logged in with their UMN account, you may get some weird things that come across and you don't know it's them. But you can at least see some usage reports here. And I think, I forget if it's under actually usage, you know, and so there's dates and things like that that you can run and you can export it as a CSV file. So that would be my recommendation if it's really just about attendance. Though I also, my caveat with that is that especially in the spring, depending on, we don't know where our students are coming from. And if we have international students that can't actually come to the US, you know, you may not have them being able to show up for Zoom meetings and things like that. And so just having some grace and some forgiveness or figuring out some ways to work with that too. If you have students that aren't able to attend your sessions because it's 2 o'clock in the morning where they live, you know, so just a food for thought there too.
Is there a way, I don't know how to require them to log in through their X500.
Yes. So when you're setting up a new meeting, and I could show you how to do this in Canvas too, but it's the same thing. When you schedule a new meeting, way down at the bottom right here, there is only authenticated users can join. And so this is going to make them sign up through Zoom. Ideally, it's going to make them do the UMN one. And this is what sometimes slows people down when they're first getting in. Things is because it has to be authenticated. There's also registration. So you can also make them register ahead of time, but that seems a little weird if you're doing it for a class. Like, it's like, I'm already part of the class, why do I have to register for this Zoom meeting that is my class, if that's what you're doing. But it could be one way to be able to see who all is coming in too.
So are you in Canvas now, or are you in Zoom? I mean, or both?
I am now in Zoom is what I'm looking at right now. There is a way to get Zoom connected, to set up Zoom meetings inside your Canvas course, so just your students in your Canvas course can see that. And again, all of the stuff that I'm going over right now are tended to drop-ins. Feel free to come in and be like, I'm lost. Sarah showed me this and it went so fast. Will you slow me down? And we can let you do that too and practice that stuff out. So what I'm showing you now is that in Canvas, there is a way to get Zoom enabled in Canvas. So I went to settings, I went to navigation tab. So settings and navigation tab, and then I'm looking for Zoom and we are enabling this. Really, okay, maybe I'm enabling this name. I'm just gonna pull it up here so I know it's there. There it is. Can save. And I also learned that if you do schedule a meeting outside of Canvas, you can pull it into your Canvas site as well. And now it's on Zoom here, and now it's thinking through all this, and here's where you can go to schedule a meeting inside your Canvas course. This little 3-button thing is also where you import a meeting. So if you've created a meeting outside of that, you can import it into your Canvas site too.
There's a question over in the chat from Laura, who's asking if there's a way to do a poll in Zoom that's open-ended for specific feedback rather than multiple choice.
I don't remember. Claire, are you the one or am I the one now that has the access? Oh, I got the. I forget which one of us has the polls. Oh, I've got the poll access.
Yep. There's, just as you're looking for that, there's also, you can use a whiteboard in Zoom. So if you're looking for some written feedback, you can have a collective class whiteboard. Sometimes that functions that way. Sometimes folks will ask a question and ask folks to type on the collective whiteboard to do that.
Is that recorded when you try to record it?
I'm not sure.
I've heard you save the whiteboards.
Yeah, the whiteboard. Great. Thanks. I had one other question. What happens, when you have the Zoom meetings and you authenticate for UMN, but then you have a guest speaker who wants to come in? They probably won't have a UMN authentication. What would you do in that circumstance? And let's say your Zoom class is reoccurring. You've set it up that way. I mean, do you just set up a special Zoom meeting for the guest speaker that's, not on reoccurring? You know what I mean?
The reoccurring adds a challenge to it, but you can add them as a co-host is one of the things if they're an instructor. Or not an instructor. If they're a guest, you can add them as a co-host so they can get in. That would make it easier for them to get in. I don't know how that would come about. Reoccurring meeting.
Well, it's just an idea for IT is that they need to have a system for guest speakers, like maybe a one-time, like a token they can use to authenticate to come in, because it just makes it. I like online teaching, but there's so many little logistical things. I'm new to it. It's just like it would make things just easier where we know, like guest speaker, I can give them a token to sign in rather than having to do a co-host, because co-host kind of means some other things too. So, it's, just something to think about. I don't know if you can do that, but, I mean, it's just, yeah. So
but at least there's a way to do it with a co-host. But I guess it's a challenge if you, I don't know how many co-hosts you can have. Like one class I have a TA, and he might be a co-host sometime. And so, you know, yeah, just, so, but I don't know if my wish is possible, but it's just an idea.
Yeah, it is definitely a concern, and I know Zoom has been changing so many things to try to make it more secure, and so that has adjusted what the workarounds for that solution has been. I'm gonna share in the chat here a resource, but I am trying to skim over it right now. Oops. And not 100% sure if this is actually answer your question. It does have guests show up a couple times, but it's mostly, I think, saying, no, you can't do this if you have a guest speaker, or here's how you can make this happen.
Sorry to jump in here. I have to run to another meeting, but I really appreciate your thoughts, everyone. So thanks. And I hope y'all have an okay day/weekend. Thanks, Sarah.
Yeah, thanks, Claire.
See ya.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thanks a lot.
everybody.
I gotta go too. Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you.